Hello, Laziali all over the world. Welcome to a special episode of Lazio Lounge. Special episode because we have a guest, Jonathan Grade. Hi, Jonathan. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be on and talk about whatever you want, Italian football, Football Italia based from back in the day, and it's going to be lovely to chat about it.
Now, I don't know if I have to be thankful to you or be a little bit unhappy because it looks like, Alison McKenzie, is it true that you're doing Lazio Lounge because of Jonathan, right? Can you explain me a little bit what happened?
Well, in a kind of roundabout way, I guess. I mean, I know we've got listeners kind of from around the world, but I'm sure all the UK-based ones will be very familiar with Football Italia. It was a kind of a real landmark football show. Started in the 90s when Gazza moved to Lazio, and was just incredible. They had live Italian football every weekend. And this is essentially how I ended up watching Serie A, started following Lazio, and ended up working as a football journalist in Rome, essentially in a roundabout way. So you've got a lot to answer for, Jonathan. But, can I just start by asking, I mean, what in your mind made the show so special, especially for people who maybe aren't aware of it, or why you think it had such an impact on people like me?
I think back then there was no European football at all. I mean, these days you put the television on every weekend, there's about 20 games from various leagues all over, more than that probably, on a Saturday and a Sunday. And this wasn't a thing back in the day. The Premier League had just launched. The whole focus was on the start of the Premier League. And there was no European football on TV to speak of. And out of nowhere, Gazza had gone to Lazio, and out of nowhere, quite late on before the 92-93 season, Channel 4 did a deal for the first season, what turned about a 10-year deal. And they basically pulled this rabbit out of the hat, and we were on air every week with these amazing games from Italy, these amazing stars, and these amazing stadiums people hadn't seen. And it's hard to put into words just what Italian football was back then. It was by a huge margin the greatest league in the world. Everyone was playing there. All the top European stars were there. All the South American stars were there. It was the absolute mecca of world football. And working on the show was a dream for a football fan, because I started off as someone who didn't know much about Italian football, and it just kicked off. It created this cult audience in the UK, and it just took off. Our first game actually was a Sampdoria-Lazio game, which was 3-3, and everyone had this preconception Italian football was dull, and we had 6 goals, and it just took off from there.
One of the things is you wrote a book about this, right? Can you tell us a little bit about your book? What's inside? What Lazio fan can find inside this book? Because there's a big part of Lazio, I mentioned.
There is. So the book is called Golazzo, the Football Italia Years, and is a look back from 92 to 2000, a chronological look back at Italian football and the strength of it, and going through season by season. And it's also intertwined with some stories from my experiences of working on the show, which was, as Alistair knows, an iconic show on British TV. It still has this massive cult following in the UK. And from a Lazio fan's perspective, there's plenty on Gazza, what his ups and downs in his 3 years in Rome. And obviously there's great detail of the 99-2000 Scudetto, which came about in incredible circumstances, from that storm in Perugia on that wet afternoon, where it's still vivid in my memory that the weather in Rome was a beautiful hot sunny day, and then Perugia, which geographically isn't all that far, was under torrents of rain.
Yeah, I was there in Rome, and the weather was great, and I still remember a lot of Lazio fans said, because the plan was they could postpone the match of Juventus on Monday. And I was in Curva Nord, and a lot of Lazio fans said, tomorrow we are all going to Perugia. So, yeah, I still remember very well that. One thing, I've been in England for like 7 years, and talking to a lot of football fans, they were all talking of this show like, everybody watch it. And that was surprising me. People was talking to me like, obviously you saw it. And I said, no, I was in Italy. I didn't see it. But everybody was expecting Paul Gazza. But when I talked and I said, I'm a Lazio fan, everybody replied, Beppe Signori. I still remember all his goals. What was your impact? What do you remember of Beppe Signori's goal? Because he had a 3 unbelievable years with Lazio.
Well, the Beppe Signori story, obviously he arrived in the summer of 92, I think. He was part of that amazing Foggia side, which Denek Zeman had, him and Ciccio Baiano and Roberto Rambaldi, who also played for Lazio later on. Beppe Signori, no one really... we, as a British audience, we didn't know about Beppe Signori. We knew about the stars, Baggio, Vialli, the big stars, Baresi, Maldini, and we saw this guy Beppe Signori in our first game score twice, and he just kept on scoring. And the joke being his right foot was just for standing on. Everything was his left foot, cutting inside, and the power, some of his goals. He was such a small guy, and the power of his strike was phenomenal. And he really had a sort of a great appreciative audience in the UK, because everyone loves a goal scorer, and he was just phenomenal. I actually said in the book at one point, I don't know when it was, I think it was about 93, 94 season, he actually scored a hat-trick of free kicks in one game. I mean, he would pop up every explosive finisher, free kicks, penalties. There's obviously his unique penalty routine with the one step and placing it into the corner. He was hugely popular, because I think from an English perspective, everyone loves watching a phenomenal goal scorer, and they absolutely love watching him.
This is the thing I find quite interesting about the Football Italia story, was essentially that I guess it was on Gazza moving to Italy, and Gazza being this kind of national icon, I guess, or at least a big story wherever he went because of the character that he was. But it ended up running way beyond, Gazza's time in Italy. As we know, it was wrecked by injuries in many ways, and he didn't make the impact that we hoped he would on the pitch. But were you surprised when, I guess, the Gazza hype faded out, but the interest was still there, or perhaps even more, at a time, like you say, where perhaps a British audience didn't know that much about Italian football, but even without having a kind of English interest like Paul Gascoigne, there was still a huge interest in the league.
Yeah, it's quite funny actually you asked that. When Gazza left Italy in 95, it was a lot of talk. It was a lot of talk in our offices. How is this going to change our production? We had a contract, but it was, are the audience still going to love it? And then that summer, Paul Ince headed to Inter, and our British connection was maintained, and he had a great relationship with James Richardson, the presenter, and he was sort of not like Gazza, but he had a real personality, and he. Unlike Gazza in a way, he really integrated. He learnt the language as best he could. And he was a star at Inter. And I think having another English star out in Italy made it almost like a seamless transition.
Yeah, I believe it was much easier to cope with Paul Ince than with Paul Gascoigne. I believe I can imagine him sticking to the plan, right?
Yeah, he was great.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Sorry, no, I was just going to say we spoke to you last year. We did a podcast about Gazza's time in Italy, but with Daniel Story, who wrote a book about it. And there's all these amazing, obviously, kind of stories and anecdotes of the various shenanigans he got up to. But I was wondering if you've got any more for us, of kind of tales of Gazza at Lazio doing ridiculous things.
Oh, yeah, there's more than there's plenty. Oh my goodness. I don't. One of them I'm not sure can go out, but I've got 3 actually from the training ground. One, he's playing. He had this game of football tennis with Alan Boksic, and they had this net, and they were like it was like a tennis court almost, and they were kicking a football to each other at each end of it. Anyway, Gazza was being Gazza and, not really thinking about what he was saying. And then he said, and Alan Boksic walked off and he's like, come on, Alan, let's see some of that Bosnia inside of you. And you cannot imagine this stuff is going out. He's Croatian, Paul. Anyway, there was that. Then we had an incident where he was at the training ground and he was, we had all the shots of all these great players in their fancy cars, and there'd be Porsches and Ferraris and God knows what parked at the training ground. And we filmed Gazza letting down Aaron Winter's tires one by one, and so then he goes to train. Aaron Winter comes back and his car, the tires are like flat, and he's saying, "Paul, what have you done to my car?" And Gazza's just like laughing, and it was just the kind of cheeky things he did. He had such a infectious personality. The Italians just loved him because he was a fan. He was like one of the fans almost. He was just there, but he was cheeky and doing all sorts. But he was phenomenal. And there's one other Gazza story where you may have heard of this one. There was a training session at it's Formello's the training ground, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yep.
Is at Formello, and so he's messing around, and Zdenek Zeman has a whistle which he was particularly proud of. So he used to always wear this whistle. Anyway, so Gazza, being Gazza, managed to get hold of this whistle, and he found a goose by the training ground, and he gets this whistle, puts it around the goose's neck, and as they're training, major trainers. There you got Zeman, this huge disciplinarian. Everyone's got their roles, and it was like black and white what each player needed to do. And a session before a big game that weekend, and this goose wanders across with a whistle around his neck, right across the training field. And that was Gazza. He would literally do anything. And actually, Pierluigi Casaraghi's spoken about this story about the goose, because he was an absolute one-off Gazza, and he just loved being popular, and the fans absolutely adored him from the start. And because he never took himself too seriously. He wouldn't mind cracking a joke at his own expense, and he was just a funny guy, and he was just loving the experience and knew how popular he was in Rome.
Yeah, do you think even the fact that he got injured, he was unfortunately at Lazio, do you think that made it even, more loved by the fans, because he was huge talent, but very unlucky. So I think that helped as well to create this love between Lazio fan and Paul Gascoigne, even because he didn't play that much, let's be honest, with Lazio. So, and if you talk to a Lazio fan of that age, he will always tell you, he loved Paul Gascoigne.
I think Gazza, when he signed, the excitement, because obviously he was due to sign and then it got delayed by 12 months because he got his first major injury from the FA Cup final. And anyway, he showed up amidst huge fanfare. It was like thousands of people in the airport, Fiumicino. And so he shows up, and he's just, the fans, it's just this, it was almost seen as this savior. They'd seen him at Italia 90, and he joined Lazio, who back then weren't the side they became later in the decade. And he was just so popular. And when he scored that goal in the last few moments of that Rome derby, when he scored, I think it was his first Lazio goal, he was like immortal in the fans' eyes, and it just grew from there. But the thing about Gazza is a lot of people look back on his time and say, "Oh, he was injured. He did this. He did that." There were times in his time with the club where he played really well. I mean, the turn of the year in both his first two seasons, he was regularly being picked, and he was having great runs of form, scoring goals. But it was just, there'd be a peak and then there'd be a trough. He'd get really high, he'd have a great spell of matches for the club, and then something would happen, and then it would be a setback. And it was just a complete roller coaster ride for him in Italy.
what's yeah, I mean, what was the kind of, I guess, your perspective on Lazio at that time? Because, like you say, it was a real surprise that Lazio managed to get a player of that level, really, considering they'd been in Serie B in the late 80s. And, you know, like you say, that was the very start of that cycle, I guess, before Cragnotti built this amazing team that went on to win the league. So, I mean, what do you remember as being the reception back home of Gazza's off, not only Gazza's off to Italy, but Gazza's off to Lazio, who I guess were a team that many people might not have known a single thing about, including Gazza himself, probably.
Yeah, I think from a personal perspective, I knew nothing about Lazio when he came to Italy. I hadn't really followed the league that closely, and I knew that Lazio was from Rome and so on. But you were thinking that back then the top clubs, Milan, Juventus, Inter had won the league a few years back. That's in the UK. That's what people would talk about with Italian football. And obviously Lazio back then really, they won the Scudetto in 1974, I think.
Yeah.
And since then, you'd had this period where Lazio had been struggling, and then you had Roma get to the European Cup final, and they weren't the dominant force in the capital. They really had to. It took Cragnotti, that incredible era of Cragnotti, to take Lazio to the heights they reached. So back at the start of that era for us, Lazio weren't seen as like this, he's joining this huge Italian club. But back then they weren't, but they became that as the years went by. They picked up trophies more regularly. Under Sven Goran Eriksson, they won the Coppa Italia, then they won the Cup Winners' Cup, I think, and then they won the league, and they won a lot of Italian cups in that spell. And I'm sure it's probably the most successful period in the club's history, because they were winning titles at home and abroad every year.
Yeah, nice memory. I remember it very well. Following Italian football, what was your favorite player in the league, if I can ask you?
Oh, God. I hope I'm not in too much trouble now. I would say, from a neutral perspective, I loved watching Alessandro Del Piero, because he came through into the side just as I started, my passion for Italian football started, and he was seen as this new Baggio, and he went on to become complete legend. I would say also, looking back, I loved watching the stars like Batistuta and Beppe Signori. The goal scoring, some of these goal scorers in Italy were just phenomenal, and I loved the attacking players. The Gianfranco Zolas, the flair players, and obviously Paolo Di Canio, one of your own. He was just. I followed him from his time when he was in Naples, and he scored actually a very famous goal against AC Milan one year, where he cut inside Baresi once or twice and put it in the top corner. But I was just, Italian football grew on me. I didn't have a team. I just loved the attacking players, and it quickly dawned on me working on Italian football that it wasn't this stereotyped, dull defensive league. It was exciting. The first 7 games we had 31 goals. It was just every week we were in these phenomenal stadia, watching these phenomenal players and these great matches. And it was just such a wonderful time for Italian football and from us in a broadcasting perspective.
What do you think? That's something that I've constantly had to defend Italian football for. I mean, obviously, the style of football is different, but the idea of it being every team playing catenaccio every week has been untrue for 30 years now, probably. But why do you think that reputation is so entrenched, and is it just laziness on the behalf of the international media who don't pay attention to the league, or is it just people remembering old Italian teams from the 60s, 70s, 80s? Or why do you think that is a an opinion that so many people get stuck with.
It's really strange because I was looking through stats, and throughout our time on air, Serie A was averaging more goals a game than the Premier League, pretty much, and it's still one of the highest scoring leagues. If you look at the stats, there's generally more goals in Serie A than the Premier League, and which is deemed as this, hugely exciting, greatest league, whatever. It's very wrong that it's judged in this way. I think it all stems back to the style of football. It's a more patient style. It's a slower build-up. It's not this 100 miles an hour Premier League, which it was back then. And I think people have seen the Italian national side, go 1-0 up, and that's fine for us. We'll get the 1-0. And I think it all sort of was a massive misconception. People made conclusions about the league. And I think when we went on air, people saw it wasn't what they thought it was, and that's how it created such a following. People watched the games and realised this was not a defensive league. That we were having endless matches with great goals and great memories, and it was just a magical time. And I think people soon realised in this country that defensive misconception they'd all had was incorrect.
Well, I think one of the reasons is Italy had amazing defender. You said Franco Baresi. We can talk about Fabio Cannavaro, Alessandro Nesta, Paolo Maldini. Let's not forget. So maybe having so many great defenders, people thought that Italian football was, catenaccio all way long. Instead, it was changing because, as you said, we had top strikers like Batistuta, Signori. A lot of amazing striker was in the league there. Were you surprised that Serie A had a massive drop off after that, or did you see it coming following Serie A from outside?
I finished working on the production in 2002, and we'd had a few sort of signs that things weren't what they were. The big transfers were coming to the Premier League or La Liga, and I don't think there were racist incidents, which didn't sit too well with Channel 4. Did we want to be promoting a product there was racism on and off, and you'd hear it in your living room on a Sunday afternoon? And I think it changed on the field and off it towards the end of our contract, which was sad, but it wasn't attracting the stars that it once was. When we came off air, Ronaldo, the original Ronaldo, went to Real Madrid, and his arrival in Italy was a sign of the strength of the league. It was just an incredible time because he was the star of world football. He was probably the Messi of his time, and it just it was phenomenal having these players. But I think slowly towards the end of the contract, things had started to tail off, and players were not coming to Italy as much, and the stars were heading to La Liga or the Premier League, and then financially, Italian football suffered. That they couldn't afford these enormous wages that other leagues could offer and these huge transfer fees. What's
your perspective on it? I guess the legacy of the show. I mean, you've mentioned that it had this cult audience at the time, and it was such a big part of like my routine back in those years in the late 90s and early 2000s, and I remember genuinely having to kind of mourn its loss when it stopped, because it took a while to get real coverage of the league back on. I remember it being passed around various kind of second-rate broadcasters for a while, and it was really hard to follow the league after Football Italia went. But do you think that those kind of, there's been I guess a revival of it in more recent years, but do you think my generation maybe are the ones who grew up watching Italian football, were the ones who are really excited by it still and have that romance and nostalgia, but Football Italia giving up on it in 2002 resulted maybe in people losing interest in the next generation?
Yeah, I think the era of football fans, it started off in the UK with Gazza, Football Italia, and the live game on the Sunday. And I think people adopted teams. I think people watched the team. They thought, "Oh, I love Parma, or I love Lazio, or I love whoever," and that was it. They were hooked on the league. And then even when we went off air, they still follow these teams. They still follow these players, and it's a huge amount on social media still talked of by English fans. I've had so many comments about the book. People saying, "God, I love that show," and is it ever going to come back? Or people really love the programs, and I think it brought a new passion for Italian football in the UK. And I think it just stuck, and people still watch it, and people look at Italian football now, and I think it is definitely its stock is rising once again. I mean, the whole Atalanta story, it's a club that's come from nowhere to reach the quarterfinals of the Champions League, winning at Liverpool. That indicates for me it's not just the Juventus going out and splashing out money and going and dominating in Europe. It's a team that's really done what they've done on very little money, and surely that shows the strength of the league, that someone can come through like that and reach such heights in Europe. And I really sort of believe that things are improving for the league now. And I think it's long overdue, but I think I definitely feel like Italian football's got some momentum behind it now. And I think this year, if we get a new champion, I think it's so desperately needed for the league. But I think if a Milan or an Inter win this championship, or whoever, I think it's going to rise even further.
Do you think this is the right year for someone else to win the Scudetto then? Are you following it now, Serie A?
Oh, yeah. I watch it every week. I honestly don't know about this title race. I think it could be anyone. There's about 5 teams or 6 teams that could win it. And I think I still wouldn't rule out Juventus this year, even if they are that far back. They've got a game in hand. Inter and Milan have still got to go to Turin. I wouldn't write them off, even though they're that far back. But I think it's totally open this year. I think it's really exciting, and it's really good having a really competitive league this year, because it's been too overly dominated by Juventus the last 8-9 years, and it is in need of a change. And Lazio, they're achieving great things. I mean, last year they were well within a shout of it. I think it's a very exciting times.
Yeah, it'd be so depressing if Juve do end up winning it again this year. I think they're never going to stop winning it if they manage to win it again this year. Before we let you go, I mean, do you want to tell people how they can get hold of your book and plug away, basically?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's Golazzo, the Football Italia Years. It's on Amazon. It's £9.99, and there's the Kindle store as well. It's £7.99 in the Kindle store. So it's especially for Lazio fans. There's a whole chapter dedicated to the Scudetto, which should bring back a lot of memories, because they were 9 points back with not that many games to go, and the story of how they won it is phenomenal. And I'd probably steer clear of the next chapter, because it talks about Roma winning the league, so you can bypass that chapter. But I mean, for any Lazio fan wanting to hark back to that wonderful era, it should bring back a lot of memories. Actually, it's interesting. When I was writing the book, the season before Lazio won the league, Lazio really should have won the league that year. They had 2 hugely damaging defeats to Roma and Juventus in a week, and they were on top for so long in that season. And so they lost the league that year, but they sort of gained it so unexpectedly the next year. And it was just must have been, as Lazio fans, a phenomenal time. Supporting the club in that time must have just been incredibly special.
Yeah, not the year before, but yes, that year was amazing. I still remember it. I remember with fun, even the European Super Cup, where we beat Manchester United of Alex Ferguson. That was a nice memory too for me. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us. I'm sorry for Alistair. I think he just beat the record for the longest question. It took like 2 minutes for every single question. But I apologize. But thank you again for joining us. It was a real pleasure. Lazio fan all over the world, especially if you miss those years, those great years, this book is perfect for you. So, if you find it on Amazon or Kindle, go and buy it because it should be fun.
Brilliant. And wishing your team the best for the rest of the season.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Bye, Alistair. Thanks again.
Bye.